Hello, Wazra here, back with another video, and today is going to be a good one. We're going to be diving into a solo KK guide. When I was first looking to solo KK, I went out and searched for a guide but couldn't really find one that covered what I wanted. So now that I'm relatively seasoned at the boss, I'm comfortable enough to make this guide so that the next person that runs into this issue doesn't have that issue. Kalphite King was the first boss that was released after EOC, which means that they really wanted to have KK use abilities and force the player into using abilities to help them get accustomed to the new combat system. One of those is stuns. KK stuns you a lot, which makes it a very frustrating boss to do. And in future bosses, they changed their philosophy around a little bit, as the bosses rarely stun the player, and if they do, it's telegraphed very heavily or it's on a simple set attack rotation. With that in mind, let's get into the guide. Starting off, we have the gear and requirements. For the requirements, I would say you want to have 99 attack, 96 herblore, 95 prayer, and 85 summoning, but 96 summoning would be ideal. And then also you'll need to have unlocked Bladed Dive and have completed the Hard Desert task for the Desert Amulet 3. As Kalphite King is considered a Kalphite task, it's kind of obvious with the name, it's advisable to only kill the Kalphite King on Slayer tasks. So this gear setup will be based on that. In the helmet slot, we have the Slayer Helm to get that massive 14.5% accuracy and damage boost. But if you either have the helmet rack in Anachronia or you're not on task, use a Trim Masterwork helm instead. In our necklace slot, we have the Desert Amulet 3, which is very good as it gives us a plus 25% hit chance when using the Karis, and it also has a 5% chance to do triple damage. It stacks up pretty rapidly as we end up doing like 10 and 12k with basic abilities, which is pretty insane. In the cape slot, we want to have our best hybrid cape, which will be a max cape or completionist cape. But if you're not max, put a defense cape there so you still have access to the sign. The chest and legs are going to also be Trim Masterwork. You can downgrade if you don't have Trim Masterwork. It's just ideal here as we're going to be doing it on a Slayer task, so the charges don't drain, which means you essentially get free armor usage, and it's T92 armor, so it's very insane. In terms of perks on there, Crackling 5, Relentless 4, and Enhanced Devoted on the top, while getting Impatient 4 and Biting 4 on their legs. If you want to be dice, you can combo Impatient 4 with Devoted 4 to get slightly more damage reduction with your devotion. For the main hand, we have the Karis, which combos with the Desert Amulet 3 as above. For the offhand, we have our best offhand weapon, which for me is a Drygore. Due to the fact that you'll be killing minions, I think E4 R3, Equilibrium 4, Ruthless 3 is the best perk slot to have in there due to the damage boost you can get from killing minions. Gloves, you have your Cinderbane gloves, another helpful thing to do more damage, and for boots you have Trim Masterwork boots. However, if you are using a Trim Masterwork helm, as mentioned above, either because you're on task or the helmet rack is in Anachronia, you want to make sure that you use Silverhawk boots instead, so that way you don't get a accuracy penalty when ranging, though it's not very major. The ring, I have my Ring of Death. You can also bring in an Asylum Surgeon's Ring spot, but I find that at this boss you end up having excess adrenaline anyway, so it doesn't really help, and Ring of Death is the best. For Aura, we have Beserker, and in the ammo slot we have Armor Spike's Alloy, which deal extra damage when KK is hitting you, and some of his abilities bleed you, which makes the armor spike go off on every single part of the bleed, so it's very powerful. And then for the pocket slot, you either want to have a Vampirism Scrimshaw or a Vampiric Blood Essence, as both of those heal you. The Blood Essence heals you less, but it is considerably cheaper to use, as Vamp Scrims have been spiking up of late and are basically at 5 mil GP each now. Very, very expensive. In terms of our inventory, we have a range switch, which are weapon, chest, legs, and amulet. We also have other switches with our ZGS to use Black Hole if we ever run into a situation where we can do that. A defender or shield. I like to have the chaotic defender or higher, so that way you end up having a chance to get the perfect Titan drops, and then your Luck of the Dwarf swap for when the kill is over. On top of that, I just have some prayer and food. In terms of the other non-obvious things in the inventory, we have a weapon poison +++. Those last 12 minutes, so I just drink a dose every 4 or 5 kills. We have both rune pouches with Body, Astral, Blood, Earth, and Death runes, which allow us to cast both Vengeance and Disruption Shield when we're on Lunars. and then we have our replenishment and overload potion in the corner there. Before we get into the individual phases, let's talk about KK in general terms. KK has a somewhat complicated but set attack rotation, and you are able to skip certain abilities by stunning at the right time. This becomes very useful when KK tries to do its green attack, which basically he tries to one-shot the player by stunning him for 7 seconds and then hitting us for 32,000 melee damage. If the ability is not dealt with correctly, you will die in a slow solo or be forced to teleport away and restart the kill. Additionally, KK spawns his minion at 75% and 25% of his HP, which are 195,000 and 65,000 respectively. These minions are centered around the center of the room and the west side. This means that the east side is where you want to spend most of the fight, as that means that only 3 of the minions will get on you during the fight. This minion spawn also skips an attack in the rotation, so it's very important to pay attention when it might happen. It's signified by the player being stunned for 1 tick. So now let's get into the fight. We're going to do each of the phases one by one, starting with range. Range phase is very nice for the player as our primary style is melee, so we deal the most damage to range. In addition, the attack speed of KK in this phase is 3.0 seconds, which is the slowest, and it's longer time between the specials, giving us more time to do damage. However, this phase can be frustrating due to the large amount of stuns that KK puts out. The attack rotation is as follows. He does 2 abilities, then his stun, then he does 2 abilities, then his green attack, then he does 2 abilities, and then his dig attack. The dig attack is unskippable. So to slot in the correct abilities, his ability rotation goes Binding Shot, Fragmentation Shot, Ricochet, Bombardment, Incendiary Shot. So now let's go over a simple example of how the ability rotation works with us stunning after the 4th ability to skip the green. So he starts off with Binding Shot, then he goes to Fragmentation Shot, then he's going to do a stun, which is going to stun us for 3 seconds, then he's going to do Ricochet, then he's going to do Bombardment, and then we're going to use Destroy when the green is supposed to come up next, which will skip that attack and go to the next ability, which is Incendiary Shot, and then it's finally going to do a Binding Shot before it digs. So now when KK pops up, he's going to go back to the start of his rotation for his attacks, but instead of starting with a Binding Shot like before, it's instead going to start with a Fragmentation Shot, go into a Ricochet, and then a stun, and then ad infinitum until it switches phase. As you can see, it's incredibly difficult to use the individual abilities as timings to know what's coming next, as the 2 rotations get desynced from each other very quickly. That's why we always reference the non-ability rotation attacks, which for range phase is stun, green, and dig. So that way we reference KK's green as 2 abilities after the stun. For completion's sake, let's also throw in a minion spawn to show how the rotation works out. So he starts off with a Binding Shot, but because we have freedom up and or can barge to KK, it doesn't matter. The second ability is Fragmentation Shot, which just bleeds us and allows our armor spikes to hit a lot of damage. Then we get stunned for 3 seconds by the stun, and he follows that up with Ricochet. In that moment, I notice that we get stunned again, which means that the minion spawn skipped the 4th ability, which was Bombardment, and we had to stun right away to skip the next attack, which was green. We use Destroy as it's a high damaging ability, but if you decide to use Destroy, you need to cancel it after 3 ticks so that it doesn't double stun KK. If you stun KK too close to the end of its attack rotation, you will end up having it double dig, which is not ideal as it wastes time that you could be DPSing the boss. That's most of what you need to know at a basic level for range phase. The rest of it comes with practice. Just make sure you're always skipping that green and don't worry about DPS until you're long into the fight. Let's get into melee phase. Once you have 1 phase down, the attack rotation becomes relatively simple for all of the phases, with them all following a very similar pattern. For melee phase, it's 2 abilities, Scoop, 2 abilities, Barge, 2 abilities, Green, which is unskippable as it's the last item in the attack rotation, with the ability rotation being much smaller with melee with Dismember, Quake, Slaughter. The green is coming signifier is the Charge, or Barge ability as it's called, as it will always be 2 abilities after the Barge. The only time it won't be is if you happen to stun by accident to skip the charge, or if the minion spawn skips the charge, so pay attention to those things. Now, unfortunately, as the green is the last ability in its rotation, it can't be skipped, so we need to do something special. When KK finishes charge, there will be 2 abilities. Usually I wait for the second ability to happen and then I freedom, so if that ability is a slaughter or dismember, I'm able to clear it right away. KK is then going to green you, but because you used freedom before the green went off, you are able to bladed dive away. If you bladed dive when the stun timer is about to be 3 seconds, then by the time KK is going to reach you, you are able to use the defensive to stay alive. Resonance if there are no minions attacking you, and devotion if there is a minion that could mess up your resonance. Should you mess up the green either on range phase or melee phase and are about to die, you can spam your freedom keybind and war's retreat teleport so that you are able to teleport right before KK is going to instant kill you. Mage phase is the final of the 3 phases of KK and is the easiest phase as there is no insta kill attack to worry about, and KK's attacks are mostly not targeted at you, but instead at the ground where you are standing. This makes Mage phase difficult in large teams, but relatively simple in solos. He has a similar attack rotation with 2 abilities, then stun, then 2 abilities, then dig, and 2 abilities, then charge. The dig is skippable in this phase, so stunning him at that moment can save a lot of time. You can tank all of the abilities that are thrown at you except for the wild magic, as it hits twice and up to 4k per hit. It's easy to notice the wild magic ability as 2 balls are thrown at you instead of 1. Let's show a kill start for Mage Phase to see what it looks like in game. So we hover over the spot that he's going to spawn to see what phase is going to be, and immediately we see that it's weak to range, so we put on our SGB. He's going to start off with his rack right away and follow that quickly up with an impact. The impact follows you, so you can't dodge it by moving around. Then he stuns, but because we're far away, we don't get hit by the stun. Then this is the combust one, which we can tank. And now this one is the chain, which you can also tank. And as soon as he throws it, he goes into his dig. Now that we're talking about digs, KK will follow the exact spot that you go to, and then you need to move away. So that's an easy way to get KK onto the east wall, as it won't follow you because it's trying to attack you from range. As soon as he pops up from his dig, he's going to throw his wild magic, which you're going to want to avoid. And then the next ability is going to be back at the start, his rack. And once he's done the rack, he's going to charge you, which can't be skipped except for by minions, as it did here, which was very nice for DPS save. There are 2 more mechanics to talk about that don't have to do with the attack rotation for KK, as they seemingly appear to be extremely random, are the green shield and the red shield. KK will surround himself with a green aura, and that means that any hit that you hit on him, he will heal instead of take damage. This is considerably annoying because it has a tendency to pop off with no warning, and when KK is really low on HP, I had a couple really fast solos be messed over by KK green shielding at 10k HP, and then it takes another minute to kill him because I healed him up so high. So just be wary of that. For the issue of skipping greens during it, I just like to stay on because it helps me keep my count a lot better, instead of being off and then waiting for the exact moment to stun KK to skip the green on range phase. On the other hand, the red aura is better because it means he can't have the green aura up. The red aura heals KK for the amount of damage that he does to you, so if he happens to be doing a lot of damage or you're soul splitting, then he can heal a lot there, but as a whole, it's not too big of a deal. Before we get into looking at a full kill, I want to highlight some advanced tactics that we will look at. Beserking at the start, ZGSing after a dig, diagonal shove on melee phase, and skipping digs on mage phase. The first advanced strategy we're going to be looking at is berserking at the start of the kill. This can be done on either melee phase or range phase, as those are the phases where we do melee, and you want to A-pot into a bard so you can get your assault bleed off. Should be noted that for range phase, you need to use assault as your third ability, otherwise the stun will stop you from being able to get your bleed off. Note that when you do Zerk on range phases, usually a minion skip will happen on the 3rd or 4th auto, so be wary of that for trying to skip the green. The second advanced strategy, ZGSing after the dig on range phase, works very well in combination with Zerking at the start. Essentially, when your Zerk rotation is done, he is going to dig, and you want to go to the east wall to ensure that he pops up on the east wall. Then you can barge into KK and use your ZGS spec into another assault to get some big damage done. Make sure you swap back to your Karis and offhand Drygor for the assault bleed. The third advanced tactic is probably the hardest one. It's the diagonal shove on melee phase. Essentially, if you are perfectly diagonal to KK, it doesn't know which direction to go to on the scoop attack, so it just ends up not doing any attack for that one. I found it very tough to time and move into the right square, and I end up losing time most of the time, and I've only got it done 3 times in my about 500 solos. Skipping digs on Mage Phase is the last of the advanced tactics, and essentially what you're going to do is normally on range phase we stun on the 4th attack to skip the green, but this time we're going to stun on the 4th attack in order to skip the dig. This means that you have much more time to attack KK, and his charge will come to attacks later. You'll know you'll have done this right if Wild Magic comes out before the dig. Make sure that he charges at you towards the east wall so that he's still on the east wall, as you didn't get the dig to move him over there. Now we're going to go through a full kill, as I have a kill that has all 3 phases in it, so I can talk about all of them at once. So the kill's going to start off this one with Mage Phase, as we hover over where KK spawns to see his weakness, and we quickly swap over to our items. We then immediately SGB spec, as KK is a large opponent, and start counting the attacks. We've already had 2. Now this is the 3rd one and the 4th one. When the 4th one comes out, we type bindings or regular bindings to ensure that we skip the dig, and then there's going to be 2 more bombs, and then he's going to charge at us. We make sure he charges at us towards the east wall so that it happens that way, and then we just keep damaging it down. Throw in a rapid fire when you know it's going to be a while for a wild magic bomb. They swap over to melee phase, and we do our 6-way switch, making sure that we swap our amulet so we have the bonus effect with the Karis. Just threshold down the boss. When it doesn't start, it's very hard to Zerk and keep up your HP. But it charges at us, and a little bit of a fail here. Normally it's best to surge through him, but this time we didn't. Just keep damaging. Quake is 1 attack, and he did this little spinorama, so I freed him a little bit early so I didn't get to clear the slaughter, but because we're getting a res here, we are going to get it anyway. When the timer gets to 4 seconds, Bladed Dive away, put your defender on, and turn your prayer off and resonance. If a minion's attacking you, don't turn your prayer off and just devotion. After this, it's kind of hard to, again, do damage. ZGSing might have been a good option here, but we're just damaging him down. 2 more attacks, and then the charge. There's 1. There's 2. And now he's going to charge across. And I just activate the Vampiric Blood Essence to get a little more healing on this barge. And then we bleed a flurry as Assault isn't up. Mindful to count the attacks, but it swaps over to range phase. So it's done 1, now it's done 2. It's going to stun us. Now we keep attacking, and once the second one goes, we destroy, and as it's really low HP, we don't cancel the destroy, and we just let it kill the boss. And that is a KK kill. And that's going to do it for today's video. Thank you for watching. This was my first ever boss guide, so hopefully I was able to provide all the information you needed without being too long. It already went on longer than I wanted to, so I won't dilly-dally on the outro. Subscribe if you like the content I'm creating, and like the video if you enjoyed it. Have a good one.